Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, Four Nerds by Nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Eloy from Third Eye Games. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. Third Eye Games and New Agenda Publishing. Actually, I have two companies now.
Okay,
So
cool. New agenda. You know what? I that was on the peripheral of my consciousness, and then when I was grabbing links, I forgot to grab that one because I put a ton of your links in the description, so people can find you and track you down like big game on the
oh
interwebs.
gosh, you did. I'm looking at it right now. Wow, you did. Um,
They give me the space, I use it.
let's add that one in then later.
Yes, I'll
But
definitely put that
for New
in.
Agenda, definitely.
New agenda. Let's start there since you just brought that up. What is New Agenda Games?
So New Agenda is this is the brand new company that we launched in 2018 this year. If it is actually 2018, I sometimes lose track of time, but we launched it in January, and it's basically myself and a few other, well, two other. Accomplished game designers, and the three of us have gotten together, and we're trying to make a space for marginalized, basically like game designers from like underrepresented or marginalized communities to kind of come in and get a shot at some game design. Not only with kind of trying, we're going to be putting up an open call very soon and bringing more people into the worlds and whatnot that we are creating. We actually have a sci-fi game that we're working on right now called Arun, which is a post-apotheosis space opera, which is really fun. And so right now we're working on that, and pretty soon we're going to have an open call to bring people in for that. And then as soon as we have that rolling, our next goal is then to go find talented game designers to mentor in the publishing process, and kind of bring them in and say, this is how we do this is how we do that, and we'll handle the publishing and stuff, and we will get you like squared away in the game design and how do you get art, and how do you do layout, stuff like that. And that's our goal, right? Is like, there's a thing that's kind of floating around nowadays in a lot of media, not just our industry, and that's about representation, right? And a lot of companies are going out of their way to make sure more women are represented in their books and are not in scantily clad outfits. They're making sure more people of color and different ethnicities are represented in the books, and that's awesome in terms of representation. It's cool for me to be able to open up a book and see something that reflects me back. I think that that's really, really awesome. But all of those games are being made by the majority, older white dudes that run these publishing companies. So basically, the only way to affect real change is to put women, people of color, people with disabilities, all of these things. You have to take them and you have to put them in positions of power. And you will see that there will be many different types of products that will be released if you actively do those things by again, like by mentoring, because it's definitely a hobby that like a certain type of person comes into, and that type of person isn't necessarily coming from some of these, like, again, underrepresented communities. So that's part of our goal there. So yeah, definitely make awesome games, and we're doing that with Maroon, and I'm super excited. That's what we were having a conversation before we started recording, but this is now Arun's system is now the fourth system that I will be creating from the ground up. Um, and not just me, I'm working with the other game designers that are owners of the company. But there you go. But obviously, the second goal is basically we're trying to execute change in the RPG industry. There's already a big push for the communities themselves, and it was really cool, actually. I was just at a con this past weekend, and I've been at so many cons where I have been the black guy at the con, and it's super uncomfortable. But but I was actually really happy. There were lots of people of different colors, and there were lots of women, and it was Andocon was the con that I was just at, and like it was very diverse, and I really enjoyed my time there. And I think it was because there were people of all different types, I felt even more comfortable in that setting. So like there's already been a move in the communities and for players to kind of start diversifying, and that's cool for representation. But now I would love to see more companies owned by women, more companies owned by people of color, and that's what we're trying to execute.
So, which is one of the I guess we tried tackling this a couple years ago in a video, but it doesn't work. It's hard because we are those white males you're talking about.
I mean,
and it's one of the few videos we ever took down. And one of our friends we had in the video made kind of a crazy statement, but it came from a place of compassion, right?
mm-hmm.
And he was like, he made the statement, I will buy a game from an underrepresented game designer, even if it's bad. I don't care. I just want to support more people in the hobby.
Okay.
Which you actually said something off air that kind of like brings it back to that a little bit. Like you worded the same thing, but in a different way.
Right.
That makes a lot more sense and maybe would have been more palatable for people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that you will buy a bad game if the designer is passionate about it,
right?
You know, just to support them, you know, pursuing their dream.
Right. I mean, unless I like know for a fact that it's bad, but I will purchase a game sight unseen if I have seen that the designer is passionate about it. Like if it ends up being bad, then like, okay, cool. I mean, at least I helped out that person in pursuing their dreams and whatnot. I mean, but obviously if I've like read the game and I like know it's bad, I probably won't spend money on it, but still, but like I said, like I ran into a couple of game designers at EndoCon where I just got to sit down and just talk with them. And I said, what is your game about? And they just went off and they just had big smiles on their face and they were super excited to explain stuff to me. And I was just like, see, I will buy that. Like, just because of you, because I've interacted with you and I see how passionate you are about it. So I will totally do that. I also don't see a problem with buying, you know, if you were to buy a game from, a game designed by a person of color to support them. I don't see a problem with that personally. It's not something that I would do, but because I only have a limited amount of money. Because basically then it's a political statement, right? And like I don't see a problem with that. Like you're basically standing by your thing, and it's kind of what I was just saying. Like you are trying to affect change, and you're trying to, even if this game is bad, maybe that designer's next game will be really good if he or she gets enough support in order to continue making games. So. I actually don't see a problem with either statement, but then again, and just to kind of go off of that too, it's one thing, like we are trying to affect change from the inside out, right? But it's kind of like feminism is also something that men, it's a men's issue as well. It's the same sort of thing, right? It's like, we're trying to get more people of color in here. And the good thing is that from every other publisher, we've got nothing but support, which is really, really cool. And I've noticed that there have been a lot more people of color, people with disabilities and whatnot being hired to these companies that were previously kind of overrun with, people who all came from a similar background. And I think that this is moving the entire RPG industry and community into areas of having way more creativity in our games. Like the games that came out this year are way different than the games that came out 5 years ago. You know what I mean? And they're way more interesting, and they come from different cultures and they bring in different experiences. And I think that that's really awesome. And like I said, like we're trying to continue affecting that change by mentoring future game designers into becoming something much bigger.
Like even with this show, I try and just invite people on I want to talk to. And like there's the producer side of the show where you're like, well, I do need to like mix it up and get some different people in here. And that part has become really tough because it seems like there's slim pickings. you know, as far as, you know, enough variety just in general, of people doing things. Now, it might just be that I don't see them, is also
Hmm.
possible. Because we've gotten flack because we do a collab game, Save or Dice. It's a fairly big project.
Hmm.
And the person who put it together sought out, you know, YouTube channels that were bigger than theirs. So,
Yeah.
you know, and in the criticism that we got that, you know, we're a bunch of white guys or there's not enough diversity in it. But when he first put it together, he put it together to collab with bigger channels.
Right.
And he's just kind of like, I don't know, point me in the direction of somebody doing something and I'll invite them.
Exactly. I mean, and that's kind of the thing, right? Is we've created this environment where uh you know, the owners of 95% of the companies out there are, you know, older white dudes, because who are the majority role players? Older white dudes. Nothing wrong with that. That's just the system that we're in. And, you know, I would like to see it changed a little bit. You know, I would love to see, and if you do have, you know, companies that are owned by people of color, they're usually like me. Like Third Eye Games is like, it's me. You know, there's Chris Spivey, it's him. Lewis Porter Jr., it's him. You know, it's like, and, you know, and we're all smaller companies, you know, but the big companies are, you know, they're owned by, you know, that type of person. So that's actually part of why, you know, when me and the other two owners of New Agenda, Jerry Grayson and Misha Bushyager, who are also, you know, two other, you know, game designers of color. So the three of us are now the owner of this company, and our goal is to then make it into a much larger company that not only are we publishing our own games, we're helping other people publish their games, and again, like mentoring people. So we're hoping that, you know, 2-3 years down the line here, when you think of those larger companies, you'll be thinking of us, and then that changes the way that you view the industry. And that changes not only how, you know, the players see the industry, but that game designers will see the industry, and they'll be like, whoa, okay, like before all the companies were all owned by, you know, white dudes, but there's a big company there and they're not owned by that. Maybe I can do that. You know, it's like, it's almost like the representation thing in books, but for business. So, you know, it's, you know, trying, and if I'm able to mentor somebody and they go beyond me, wonderful. I would love that. You know, but, you know, there you go. I'm done rambling now.
Our kind of like our mission statement is to bring more people into the hobby and more gaming. And when we did that video, which we ended up having to take down, by the way, but that's a whole nother story. When we did that video, like my main point is like when I see whole I'm just like a numbers guy, right? And when I see whole demographics that are underrepresented, I just see a bunch of people that we could, like, I could preach to other, you know, other people that are already kind of aware and playing the game, or you go into these like vast areas, you know, pastures of people that maybe they're not even aware, they're not playing the game. To me, that seems like a much easier sell, and you know, you're gonna get more bang for your buck too if, you know, your goal is to bring more people into the hobby.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the thing, right? It's kind of the difference between, you know, it's kind of like from a business standpoint, it's kind of the difference between, all right, cool, I've decided I want to make, you know, D&D 5th edition supplements as my business model. And basically, you are tapping into an existing community base that has, you know, one of the highest sales in the industry. So as long as you do good products, you'll probably make money. You know, so, you know, same kind of analogy, like obviously if you're tapping into a community that is going to be more receptive and blah, 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 which usually ends up being a certain type of person, then yeah, you're probably going to get more bang for your buck when you do that. The opposite side of that would be like what I do, even with Third Eye Games before I started doing New Agenda, was I make games that are, you know, completely different from the games that are out there, and I start building brand new communities. And it is much harder to do. It is very, very difficult. But I've been doing this now for 10 years, and it's, you know, I actually have a really good community behind Third Eye Games, and, you know, a lot of them are coming over now to New Agenda now at this point. So I like to see that people are not only just, supporting me, but they also love the games that I'm creating, and they're excited about this new thing that I'm doing. But I went to AndoCon, and Andocon's game room, it had about, I think it was like 9 tables, and they ended up having to throw a 10th one in order to support more Pathfinder and D&D and Starfinder and all that stuff that was running. And that's the majority of what was running. It was basically Pathfinder, D&D, Starfinder, and then like me and my little games. And then there was Derek Kamal was there, and Craig Campbell. And it was like the 3 of us were in there running games that were not those 3. My table was full every time. We were having an amazing time playing these games, and I had multiple people say, like, this is so different from everything that I've seen. And like, I love to hear that. But then, the next question becomes, how do I make it so that that's not the case? There are these giant powerhouse companies that have all the marketing, they have all the advertising and marketing expenses of, huge companies, and they have these huge communities that have been building for, 40 some odd years. And, people, when they think of D&D, and that's, when they think of role playing, they think of D&D, and that's like what they think of. And they don't even realize that there's, hundreds of other companies out there doing things. One more thing, and then we can move on. Otherwise, I'll just start rambling more and more. But I've been on a few panels, but one of my all-time favorite panels that I was on, and for completely the wrong reasons, I was on a panel. It was a DM advice panel. So that should tell you right there what's going on. It's a DM advice panel, not a GM, a DM advice panel, and they put me on it. Someone who does not play D&D. I do not play Pathfinder. I play a little bit of Starfinder. It's not bad. So it's me, and it's Jason Bullman, and it's Monty Cook. So most of the questions were, all right, so I have this problem with these players, and I kind of want them to be able to do this thing in the game, and how do I make that happen? And usually my answer was, I think what you should do is you should put D&D aside, and you should go play this game that was designed by this person, because it does the thing that you want to do in D&D, because D&D doesn't do that. And they go, okay, and then they turn their attention to Monty and Jason, and then they would give, D&D answers. And, like, well, I think what you should do is kill your bard, and everybody laughs, But basically that was like my role. I loved it though. Like, I got to pimp so many indie games that would solve all of these players' issues. The game would solve it, because what's ended up happening is, like, people who play D&D, they want to shoehorn these like different things into the D&D mechanic, but D&D does what D&D does, and it does it very well. So that's not even saying that D&D is bad, but when there are so many people out there that think D&D is the only game, so if you want to do something, you have to make D&D do it. But that's not really the case. There are so many other games out there, and most of them will do those things that you want to do. So anyway, I love telling that story because it's such an explanation of like my mindset. Like, I love just like being the person that like everybody's like, oh, why is this guy even on the panel? It's just like, why I'm on the panel? Because I have a different point of view than what the other people have. And I love Jason and I love Monty, so that's obviously not saying anything, bad about them either, or the games that they, produce. But I really love to point out to people that there are lots and lots of games out there. Okay.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because a lot of times we get those same questions. I mean, our channels are primarily a D&D channel, but we do play some other things. Like, we're talking about doing a Fate Wild Wild West Dresden Files. We just finished up Marvel Superheroes
very cool
role-playing game from back in the 80s. It's been dead for about 30 years. And, we play Star Wars, and we played Shadowrun using Cypher System. So but we get the question all the time: how do I play Star Wars with Fifth Edition Dungeons and Dragons? I'm like, why would you? Like
Yeah.
they literally have a bunch of Star Wars games out. Which edition do you want to use? You know,
Right.
or I want to do this thing, and like, well, we're like, well, Mutants and Masterminds is really good for that, or
Hmm.
you know, or Cipher System's really good for that, or you know, what about Numenera? But you know, there's just so many different games, and
Hmm.
D&D. So like, I forget who was on here and said it. It might have been. I'm not going to even say the name because I'm probably going to get it wrong. But you know what they said was D&D is its own trope, and that is so true.
Hmm.
And it, you know, and to what you were saying, like there's something to be said for brand recognition,
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
and that's why you know Ryan Chaddock and Rich LaFleur both built sci-fi games to play in Fifth Edition Dungeons and Dragons, to to tell those stories, I guess.
Yeah.
Where like you're saying, there's more than likely there's a system that does that thing, or if there isn't, you could always make one
Well, that's
that's better
usually
at
my
it.
plan. That's my plan whenever I do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll just make a brand new thing that does that. But not everybody has, the game design chops to make that and make it work. Like I've seen lots of systems where, it basically turns, obviously there's the heartbreakers, right? It's where, somebody played, D&D and they're just like, I could totally do something with this. And they take D&D and they just like, they change a couple of things and then now it's a brand new game, but it's basically still D&D. And, like that's cool if that's like kind of where you're going with it. But I love to try, like I'm that kind of person that like when I go to a con, I want to try a brand new game. I love going on Kickstarter and supporting new games that are doing brand new things because I love to just read. And it might be because I am a game designer. I like to check out other systems. I like to see what people are doing. What innovation are they doing with this mechanic or whatever? Because I hope to read those things and then become inspired. To not create something that's the same because now that game's out there. Because that's also like my benchmark is I have this cool idea for a game. The first thing I do is I go make sure that there isn't another game out there that already does it, right? Like I'm probably never going to make a fantasy game. Like there's a lot of fantasy games out there, and if I even had an idea for like a certain type of fantasy game, I'm sure somebody's done it, because there's a lot of different fantasy games out there. But like when I started Ninja Crusade, there weren't any games about ninjas. Like there were games that had ninjas in them, but not a ninja game. Same thing when I made Mermaid Adventures. I wrote that game for my daughter because she was really into mermaids at the time. And I was like, well, you really, okay. I was like, so if I find a game that's got mermaids in it, you'll play it with me. She's like, yeah, I would love to. And I'm like, I scoured the internet looking for a game that had mermaids in it. Not one. So I was like, okay, well then I guess I have to make a new game for mermaids. Done. Let's do that. So that's where a lot of my game design passion comes from, is kind of filling in these holes that the industry has kind of left, without a game in it. And I just take my idea and I just stick it in that hole. That's kind of my strategy. That's why I've stuck around for so long.
That is the best reason to create something, because when I ask someone why you did something and the only thing they can say is to be different, or some like answer that doesn't really mean anything, I'm like, I just gotta start rolling my eyes, and especially if it's something they ask me they want me to be a part of. I don't really like. Why did you make this change? Oh, just to be different. Well, that's that's not a reason to make changes. You make changes to solve problems, fill needs,
Right.
do something new and exciting and innovative. But
Right.
if it's a lateral move or a move backwards, why bother?
You're telling me.
But so Elf Bait has a question. In your opinion, what can us beardy white dudes do to promote diversity?
So as a player, it's kind of difficult, right? You don't have much power to affect change. Like on a large scale, like you can change it in your group, like and try and invite more people of color to game stores. Go to high schools start like a gaming club and try and get people and kids from, you know, stuff like that. So I mean, like, you can do like your smaller things, and I think that that's kind of the thing, right? Is where, you know, it becomes that sort of thing of like, how do I affect change, and what kind of change are you trying to affect? And that's the question, right? Is like, how can us, you know, white bearded, you know, nerdy dudes, you know, help with diversity? You know, and that's kind of it's such a large question, like, and there's probably several answers. Like, I found my answer. My answer is like, it was New Agenda Publishing, and we're basically going to mentor people and put them in positions of power, and basically where we are forcing the industry to change that way. From the player side, I would say support. So, you know, not in the way that like you support them even if they're bad, but, you know, but support people of color. You know, help them spread the word. A lot of us, you know, smaller companies and stuff, we're very grassroots. Like, you know, Third Eye Games has survived a long time because we have a small but rabid fan base. So a lot of it is like, whenever I come out with a game, I obviously I see a lot of the same names who are backing my Kickstarters and purchasing my games, but they don't stop there. They go and they share it, and they're talking about it, and they're doing all of those things. And that, you know, from a grassroots part, that's a big deal. But honestly, for me, I think the biggest thing that I can say would be you need to kind of step out of your own bubble, right? Because that's what ends up happening. Like, the industry and the communities are not filled with older white dudes by accident, right? It's filled with older white dudes because older white dudes know other older white dudes, and they are telling their older white dude friends about that. And then and that's the thing. Like, we surround ourselves with people who make us feel comfortable, and a lot of the time, this is just humanity. It ends up being people who look like us and act like us and are part of our community. And like, that's cool. So basically what you need to do, everybody just need to take a step outside that bubble, go to a local con and, invite people you've never played with before, create games that, games and I mean, when I say create games, like, it could be create a whole game, or it could just be write new adventures where it requires you to research a culture you've never heard of, or you've never learned about. You know what I mean? Like, just expanding your mind and kind of stepping out of your bubble that's a big step forward. Michael Jackson said it best. It starts with the man in the mirror, and then you're going to make that change. Once you kind of recognize, you have to recognize that bubble. You know what I mean? You have to, because that is actually part of the issue, is that people are in bubbles, but they don't realize that they're in bubbles. And I even was in a bubble. Like it wasn't until I got into the industry that I realized that, women had a hard time in the gaming, in the gaming community. I didn't even realize that. I didn't realize that, like, for me, it's like, I've been lucky that, like, since I got over my teenage years, where it was just, again, I was surrounding myself with other teenage boys. But as I became an adult and I started having more groups, all of my groups had either, equal number of women or majority women. So, like, when I took a step outside of that bubble and I started running games at cons, that women weren't, 50% of, the RPG community, because it just wasn't my experience. But that's the thing about it, is you really do need to get a new perspective. And that goes for everybody. Everybody needs to get a new perspective, and be open to challenging yourself and changing yourself. And that's hard. Like, making a real personal change is a very hard thing to do. So I'm not saying it will be easy, But I think if we all do that in the community, and of course this is like theoretical stuff here, like if everybody in the industry changed, of course it would be amazing. But that's not likely to happen. But if you change, then people will be like, whoa, he kind of changed. What? And then then all you have to do is talk with that person and be like, hey, what's different? And you'd be like, oh, well, I started gaming with different types of people, and I started talking and having conversations with people who have perspectives that are different than mine, and it's like, it's like, it'll blow everybody's mind once you do. It's crazy. But again,
it took our personal gaming group like 20 years to evolve.
Exactly. It's not going to happen overnight. And like I said, like New Agenda is part of this change that we're trying to make it happen. So hopefully, I think the tide is already going in that direction. And basically, like New Agenda is like, the wind's already going in that direction, but we're turning on, a giant fan as well to kind of push the wind along a little bit faster. So that's the goal here.
One of my favorite quotes is from Lois Porter Jr. during one of his transparency agenda videos that he does, and he's like, how do black people get into gaming? They have a white friend. Is one of the things that he said.
I mean, yeah, I got in through my white friend. So
well, like if you go all the way back to Gary Gygax, I guess it makes sense because war gamers and it's where something. But with anything, it's just a simple invitation. You invite people; they'll either get involved or they won't. But
exactly.
But because you invited them, at least like they're aware, right? Yes. So that's all anyone can do.
Well, and that's kind of the thing too, right? Is where does that line get drawn, right? It's like, I've opened the door and I'm completely okay with anybody coming in through that door. But if they don't know that door is even there, then how would they even know to come through? You see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Once you open the door, it's on them.
Right. Well, it's not really on them. If you open the door, it's then your responsibility to go let people know that door is there.
Well, that's what I mean. Yes. By inviting people in, letting them know that they're welcome, and then it's on them whether they want to take part or not.
Exactly. You can't make them come through the door, but you do have to let them know that it's there. That's
another one of the questions I'm sure you hear on those GM panels. How do we make player do X?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
TrueMate has a question, and you can even say one of your own games if you like. What's the most non-mainstream RPG you've played and enjoyed?
The most non-mainstream. I will actually say one of my own, because I have a few, and I have some like more traditional games. I also have some kid games which are fun, but a lot of my game design is fairly traditional. Usually it's like traditional with like a layer of like indie design on top of it to kind of make it pop and make it awesome. But I would say that my game, which is called Sins of the Father, is probably one of my favorites. It was because the reason it's one of my favorites too is because there was a long period there where I was, I started off kind of by myself, just designing games, right? Just me in a room, and that's it. And then as I grew, I started getting, more people on and hiring more people, writers, editors. There's getting a ton of people in. And this game, Sins of the Father, was basically my chance to kind of go back to my roots. And I actually took some time and I said, I am going to just sit down and I'm going to write this whole game myself, and I'm going to play test it myself, and that it's going to be amazing. And even if it sucks, then, at least it was just a fun exercise of, me just sitting down and having a fun time designing without cat wrangling freelancers and, doing a ton of crazy stuff like I'm doing for my latest game. So I sat down and I wrote it. And when I was done with it, I sold out at Gen Con, which was amazing. And then I was like, well, people seem to really dig this. So I submitted it for the ENnie Awards. And then it was nominated for Best Game at the ENnie Awards. And I didn't win. I should go ahead and say that. But but the fact that my game, my little game that I wrote like in a couple of weeks and play tested for another couple of weeks and just had a fun time writing, was up against Time Watch from Pelgrane Press. It was up against Bubble Gumshoe from Evil Hat. It was up against Seventh Sea from John Wicks Presents, and Tales from the Loop, which was just like, that was actually the one that won it. That's from, Modifius and Free League. And like, it was a huge game, sold tons of copies. And the fact that my little game went up against these like big heavy hitters, like it was like one of those just amazing moments. Like I knew I wasn't going to win just because of the competition, and they have larger fan bases and whatnot, but just to be nominated for a game that I sat down and I wanted to challenge myself to design a new type of game was just really awesome. So now with all of that said, because that's the sentimentality behind the game there. The game itself is called Sins of the Father, and you play characters that are called Hellborn. And basically your family sold your soul before you were ever born. So as soon as you come of age, your family says, hey, I've been serving our Dark Lord for, the last 20 years. I'm done doing that. It's now your responsibility. So it basically becomes a game of you having to run around and do very just terrible, despicable things in order to work off your debt to this Dark Lord. And the hope is that you will eventually be able to work off your debt and not have to pass it on to your child, as your family has done. However, the game's conceit also says that because you were raised by a corrupted person, most of the characters are not the best people. So they can be easily corrupted. A lot of them will work off some debt, and then they'll be like, but I might be able to ask my Dark Lord for that thing that I want. And then they just pile on more debt. And there's like a million ways to get debt and like 2 ways to get rid of debt. So it's one of those things. And I actually see the comment here. It is very much like the show Reaper. And I actually do call out Reaper in the book because the game as written is actually really, really dark, and it goes really bad very quickly. But I did talk about how you can take that idea and make it more humorous, and I used Reaper, which was one of the main inspirations for the game. Basically I was like, can I do Reaper but like make it super dark? I wonder if I could do that. And part of the game design aspect that I was challenging myself with was that I really wanted to make a game that used cards, playing cards, because I had never designed one that used playing cards. All my stuff had been dice. So I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Let me make a game that uses cards. And it came out wonderfully. And there's so many cool like tricks you can do with cards and manipulating other people's decks. And it's just amazing. So I was very happy with the end result. It was nominated for, an award, and I was like, yes. So big success on that game. I think, there you go. So I would say, so that game.
Cards is a resource management or is the randomizer?
The randomizer. Yeah, it's like the whole game is cards. And it's, it's a cool little game, sells for $20. It's a like 90-page little book.
Well, I've seen 2 different versions where you're flipping cards to generate the result, or where you're curating a hand and you have resources to manage.
Right. This one is basically you flip cards, and basically me as the GM, I have 2 decks, and I can pull from either one of them, and then that is basically like your difficulty, and then you have to pull from your cards in order to try and beat the difficulty. So if I pulled a 6, you need to make sure that your card that you pull is a 7, and there are ways to be able to draw additional cards. There are ways to manipulate the number on the card, either up or down. You have, different tricks that you can do. My favorite one is called, because it's based on the 7 deadly sins. So one of my favorite ones is it's a pride power that you can get. And it's called Face the Face. face to face, and it's basically you can choose to just flip until you get to a face card. So you just like, nope, not going to use that one, not going to use that one. Ah, cool, a king, done, I won. So it's one of those. So it's like, but of course, my job as the soul master is what I called it. But my job is to mill you, because if you get down to the bottom of your deck, there you go. You have to take on a debt. So again, yet another way that you take on debt in that game.
So what are some of the other games that you've done, and or you've done, you said 4 systems in the last 10 years?
Yes.
And then
four, yes.
And then it looks like you have different games, or different, I guess, would there be settings or games that go with them?
Exactly. So my first system was the dynamic gaming system, and it was my very first attempt at designing anything. And I think it was actually pretty good first time around, but a couple of years ago, I went ahead and did a second edition of the game. It's called Apocalypse Prevention Inc. That uses the dynamic gaming system. And the second edition is like, it fixed all my issues with it, and it made it way more playable, and it's amazing. Don't go play first edition. Pick up second edition. It's a much better game. I can admit that as the designer, because I'm just a much better designer nowadays than I was when I started. I think that just comes from doing anything for years and years. But that game was cool. It used a single D20 for every roll. And it had an interesting kind of initiative system that I thought was pretty cool, where everything had kind of speeds that you would do. So your initiative really mattered. So if you, in a regular game, if you rolled 30 and I rolled 1,000,000, that would mean I go first, you go second. But in this case, the number between our initiatives actually does matter, because if I rolled a 35 and you rolled a 25, then I might be able to get 2 speed 5 attacks in before you get to act. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those sorts of things where and the goal behind that was, there were a lot of different tactical games, but it was all about getting to the right position, making sure you didn't, give people attacks of opportunity. And, and it was very tactical, like minis. And I kind of wanted to create a new type of tactic, because it was what are you attacking with? How are you attacking? Is that the right move at this point based on the initiative numbers? So it added a different layer of tactics to it, which I thought was really, really fun. And so in the game is Apocalypse Prevention Inc. It's basically Men in Black meets Buffy. So it's, you are kind of going around and you're policing supernatural creatures on Earth. So vampires, werewolves, dimensional creatures. So it's very Men in Black in that way, but it's kind of tongue in cheek. It's kind of humorous. And there's a lot of fun martial arts in it. So there's that. And API was my very first game. So I was super excited to do a second edition of that game. And I was very happy with the result that came from that. The second system that I have here, well, I guess the second system was, all right, so the second system I created was the PIP system, actually. And that was the system that I created for Mermaid Adventures. And it basically was my game that I was I need to make a game that my 7-year-old can play. So it's super simple. And you kind of it uses 2 different colors of D6s. Black and white is what I use as the examples in the book. And it's because I was playing a lot of Fiasco at the time. So I had black and white D6s just kind of around my desk at the time, and I was only using them for Fiasco. So I decided, let me create a game that I have another use for these dice. So I did that with the PIP system. So there's that, again, another challenge for me. I'm what else can I do with these dice? So I did that. The game was really good. I ran it for my daughter and she loved it. I ran it for my daughter at her birthday party and for her friends, and they all loved it. Started taking it around to cons and everybody loved it there. So I was okay, cool. So there's definitely something here. So I started selling. I sold Mermaid Adventures. I created a follow-up game called Infestation, which is it's an RPG of bugs and heroes is the tagline, where you play bugs and you're fighting for different rooms in the house and stuff like that. So very kind of kid driven. but family style gaming, because the whole point behind it was for me to play with my kids. So I'd had tons of emails from parents who picked up the book and started playing it with their kids, and that's like how they were introducing their kids to the game. Just this past year, I refined the system into its own core book. So now there is actually the PIP system core book that you can actually pick up now, and it is its own book now, and we're releasing settings for it. We have Mermaid Adventures and Infestation out for it now. We're working on a game called A Kid's Guide to Monster Hunting for it. I'm also talking with other publishers who are interested in using the system for their games. So it's actually kind of taken on a life of its own. This little game that I created, for my 7-year-old, who's now 14, by the way. So, God, time flies. But yeah, so it's like, it's funny like how that kind of happened. So like the PIP system's like its whole own thing, and it's fun to like go in that direction, because I get to talk to a bunch of parents, but like when I'm at a con and I have a booth, like I end up having like lots of kids to come to my booth, and I get to like talk to them, and I have my biggest fan is how I always describe her. Her name's Maeve, and she came to my booth when she was like 8. And like now every year at Gen Con, she comes by and she's like a member of the family. Like I ask her how she's doing in school, and she tells me about the game she's playing, and like, it's so much fun, like knowing that like my games are like how kids are growing into the hobby. And it's one of those. So that was like, like how I'm doing it with like underrepresented communities and stuff now with New Agenda. Like the PIP system became kind of like my way of bringing kids into gaming. And like when I released that, there weren't a ton of kids games. There actually are quite a few kids games nowadays. But I remember like when Mermaid Adventures first came out, I was at my booth, and it's crazy because I had like API, and I had ninjas, and I had gods, and then I had mermaids, and people would just walk by like Mermaid Adventures, like it was like a big joke. And then like a year later, then like oh kids games are a thing. Oh, wait a minute, it's like it was kind of funny. So basically what I'm saying is I'm a hipster. I had a kids game before everybody else had a kids game.
Take that, No Thank You Evil.
But I like No Thank You Evil, and it's really awesome. And I'd like to think that me releasing Mermaid Adventures years and years ago is, maybe was something that pushed the industry in that direction. Who knows? I'd like to convince myself that I have that kind of power, but I probably don't.
It's one of the questions we get often is, how do I get my kids in, or what's the right age to start your kids playing D&D,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, we would point them towards No Thank You Evil or Adventure Playground, and now we have Mermaid Adventures as well, as to point people in the direction of, because those games they're geared towards kids. Like No Thank You Evil is really great because it teaches kids resource management, and the way the game's set up with the chits, a really young kid can see, oh, I pay 3 for this.
Yes.
And move them away from her pile and go, oh, and it teaches, fundamental math at the same time,
mm-hmm.
and brings them along. My partner, Ted, he's played No Thank You Evil several times with his kids, were like 9 and 5 at the time. So it's good that these are out there, and it goes back to even speaking to what we started with in the conversation about diversity. Well, if you can grab kids young and get them involved in things like they don't have all the baggage that we get as we get older, like even
right.
into your teens, right?
Yeah.
They can just see a thing and have fun with it, and they're not thinking about so much, what the other kids are thinking, if they find something that's fun. But right. once they hit like the tweens, forget about it.
Yeah, my daughter, like I said, my daughter's 14 now, and she would rather have nothing to do with anything that I make now. But like when she was 7, she was all about it. I mean, and like you said, like that's kind of what happens when you're a teenager.
I know. I have several of them myself. My daughter's 13 and my son is 17. One is a gamer and one is not. Like I tried getting my daughter into, and it might have been too early for her anyway, with with D&D, and I figured, well, you know what? She's into Monster High. Like, we made her a shifter bard. So it totally made like the kind of character, like she was still kind of playing with dolls a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm like, minis are just small dolls, you know? So, but, and honestly, the only thing she really latched onto was I had given her spell cards to use, and she wanted to use them and play them like they were Pokemon cards, even though she had never played that
Right.
game. So, wasn't her thing.
I mean, it is what it is. I have my youngest is almost 2, so my goal is, since I apparently failed with my other 2 kids to get them into gaming, my goal is to make sure that this third one is going to be a geek.
So I have some advice on that.
Yeah.
It has been handed down to me from someone else. Put everything out of their reach and tell them that's not for you. It's a little complicated. That's a grown-up game.
That's it. I mean, sounds like bad advice. I'm not sure. So yeah, so there's that. So anyway, and real quick, because I know we're running up against time. So my third system that I created was the chakra system, and it was the system that I designed from the ground up for Ninja Crusade 2nd edition. First edition used the DGS, which was the same system I used for Apocalypse Prevention Inc. But I had decided with the 2nd edition, I really wanted to go in a completely different direction, and I created a system that uses D10 pools. But it has this really cool kind of mechanic where the players can voluntarily complicate scenes in order to reward the group as a whole. Which became really fun, and it's so fun. But also, even combat wise, because if you're a ninja, you're really into doing ninja-y things. But I basically came up with like a system where you have initiative, but you also have the ability to interrupt and rewrite the scene and stuff like that. Because there's so much, like, if you watch any Naruto, there's always like, I just pulled off my biggest jutsu ever, and then the guy says, yeah, but I knew it was coming, and before you ever did that, I did this other thing that now is so like I basically created the system so that you could do that sort of fight, where you could technically rewrite the scene in the middle of the fight and make it really, really awesome. So, and again, I designed systems in order to solve issues, and the 1st edition was good, but 2nd edition blows the 1st edition out of the water. That one was the one that actually won at the Ennies last year. It actually won the Spotlight Award, the Judges Spotlight Award. So like it actually did win an award, which is nice. The other one just got nominated for an award. But this one won an award. And it's actually the system that I'm using for my game that I'm actually about to go into public playtesting with, which is called Part-Time Gods. And it's also its 2nd edition. And it's going to be using the same system that I used for Ninja Crusade, the chakra system. So I'm super, super excited about that, by the way, because that's my baby right now. Is the Part-Time Gods 2nd edition. I'm super excited about that. So to sum up, the last one, it's called the Horizon system, and it's currently being written and designed. But the goal of it for Arun is to it's kind of like my very first kind of game where I'm making you get to be the big damn hero, and it should be fun. So like the roles are very skewed towards like success and all of that, and it's super like high action, and I'm really excited about it. And I don't really have too much more to share publicly about it, but I'm very excited about it, and should have more soon. But I actually was having I don't know if you've ever had Sean Patrick Fannin on the show, but like me and Sean, like we respect each other, and we're actually really good friends. But like our games don't necessarily appeal to each other, which is fun, right? Because he is like the big damn hero, and he loves to play like he likes to do the good thing and be the hero and be awesome and epic. And I write these games where like you're exploring humanity, and it might depress you, and It's like, like it's so easy to be like a giant jerk in my games. Whereas, in the games that he designs, you get to be that big damn hero. And I think our games appeal to different people, but I love the fact that the two of us can sit down and we can debate like why one is good and why one, might be better than the other and whatnot. We have an amazing time having those conversations, because I think that there is a place for lots of different types of games. So there's that. I feel bad. I feel bad because I really just like kept talking. So
one of the early comments was, when we have a guest like this, I don't like to ask questions because I just like to hear what they're talking about. so there's nothing wrong with that. And also congratulations, because you recently successfully funded a Kickstarter.
Yes. That Kickstarter was for HPL Prep. So HP Lovecraft Preparatory Academy is the full name. I reduce it because it's long, but it's HPL Prep, and it's our Cthulhu prep school game, and it's pretty fun. This game was actually designed by a friend of mine, and I got to play it and I loved it. So we basically came up with an agreement, and I was just like, I would love to put like the power of Third Eye Games behind this game. So I wasn't the designer, but I got to help him develop it, and obviously I'm going to be the publisher, so I get to do all the art and the printing and the fun stuff, pay the people to edit and do all that stuff. But the best thing about HPL Prep, in my opinion, and this was something that, when I had a discussion with the designer, was I was just like, well, here's like what you would be making, based on the publishing agreement. And he says, I don't even want it. I want whatever money would go to me to go to autism research. And he knew that was going to get me, because one of my kids, my oldest son, is autistic. So of course I'd be like, well then, yeah. It's like, because I always do something like that every year where, one of my games, I'll take some portion of it and I'll donate it. I do a lot to like Autism Speaks, and we do like the yearly march and, all that stuff for the cause. So I always end up donating some portion of my money to that. But now it's actually pretty cool. It gets to be official, because that's part of our publishing agreement, is now any money that would go to him now will go to autism research. So I think that's really cool. And we didn't talk a lot about it during the Kickstarter, because Kickstarter has a thing about the money going to charity, and you're not allowed to do charity things on Kickstarter. So I didn't want to talk a lot about it while the Kickstarter was going, but since it did end already, I can actually start talking about it. And that, yes, so a portion of every sale of HPL Prep is going to go towards autism research. So I'm proud of that, as well as, hopeful that even just that little bit will make people, give this kind of unknown game kind of a try. I mean, it's already, school based, and that's fun, and it's Cthulhu, themed, and that's fun. But, even the people who maybe that won't, impress them, I would love for them to maybe say, but, part of it goes to charity, so I'll try it out anyway. And then that means more people get to try out this really cool game. And the cool thing about it also is that we're actually translating the game to both the PIP system, which is, I talked about it already, my home system here, as well as to Savage Worlds. So it'll be different ways to actually play it. So I'm actually really excited about that as well.
There's a couple people in the chat that are already mentioning that they're excited for the idea of that game, Cthulhu
Yes.
Prep School. So you might be looking at YouTube, but we're going out to Facebook and Twitch
okay,
as well.
Even better. Yeah, I just have the feed up here.
Yeah. So I have like an aggregator that sends all the chats. Well, it used to send
awesome.
all. Now it's just YouTube and Twitch. For some reason, Facebook has dropped off, so I'll have to go back to that game. I believe it is open for pre-order now, so if you go to the website.
For HPL Prep, not quite yet. I'm setting up a backer kit for it. I wish backer kits weren't as complicated as they are, but it takes a bit to get it right. But that should be available. I mean, my thought would be next week. For pre-order, and then it should be ready.
There was a pre-order button on the Kickstarter.
Oh no, I should go check that and make sure that.
So I'm not sure where that goes. I did not click it, but I thought, and could be misremembering, but I thought I did see one there.
Okay.
But that being said, do you have a newsletter or something where people can stay tuned in, plugged in?
I do, or do I? So anyway,
Maybe. Just
the
explore
biggest
the
thing that-
website until you find it or buy
yeah, the
something.
biggest thing that you can do is go to, thirdeyegames.net is the main, the main website. I am also on Facebook, and that's actually where I do a lot of posting. So if you go friend me, I'll accept your friend request. I do that a lot. I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and I think, out of like the 800 or 900 people that follow me on Facebook, I think 100 of them are actually my friends. And like, then there's like a nice big number of people who follow me because I talk design, I talk publishing, on my Facebook, I use it kind of as my place to kind of rant about things. So, it's entertaining in that way. So my name's Eloy Lasanta. So if you go and you send me a friend request, I'll accept it. And then
The first thing I look at when I get new friend requests is
Mhm.
like, do they even game?
Yes, I usually I look at like mutual friends, and I'm
Yeah.
like, if you're also following like Cam Banks and a number of other people that I know, then I'm like, cool, I'll just accept it because you're following the same people that I follow. So it works out. But yeah, I mean, it always helps if like you have a D20 or something in one of your pictures.
Yeah, yeah. It's anymore. It's all gamers or cam girls, one or the other, that
Pretty
I'm getting
much,
friend
pretty
requests from.
pretty much. But it's fun, and obviously, I'm on Twitter at Third Eye Games, G plus. Just look up Third Eye Games, just type in Third Eye Games in any screen on your computer. Likely something of mine will come up. But yeah, we have a lot of games. I'm trying to get to as many cons as I can this year. We have some big new games coming out this year. HPL Prep is one of them. Part-Time God's Second Edition is another, where I'm starting to do we're starting to get like playtest groups together, and that's going to end up being on different people's YouTube channels, different people's podcasts, and stuff like that. So we're making the push for that one right now, because that's the biggie right now is Part-Time God's Second Edition, and I'm super excited about that.
Sweet. So that brings us up right around the hour mark. So I appreciate
Yes.
you coming on. Thanks so much. And if you have any other people that you want to recommend for guests, feel free to direct them in my direction.
I mean, I have a long list. Yeah.
And thanks everyone for hanging out with us today. Greatly appreciate it. So until next time, stay nerdy.